5 cars rolled up the gravel drive, their tires crunching like bones beneath the weight of expectation, only to stop dead at the sight of my estate. Their jaws slackened. Their legacy had been quietly replaced. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the text blur as my heart beat in a strange, quiet rhythm. A kind of emotional arrhythmia I couldn't name. It wasn't the absence of my name that shocked me. It was the clarity, the finality. The way everyone had seen that message, replied with heart emojis and can't wait gifs, and not one person had noticed I wasn't on the list. Or worse, they had noticed and said nothing. The betrayal wasn't loud or dramatic. It was passive, clean, executed with the efficiency of people who'd practiced excluding someone in whispers for years. I reread it. Not once, 5 times. And with each pass, the silence around my name grew louder. My family had always prided themselves on unity, potlucks, endless birthday group chats, matching Christmas pajamas. We weren't perfect, but we'd always claimed to be tight-knit. A blood bond wrapped in traditions, casseroles, and backhanded compliments, but that bond had clearly frayed, and no one had cared enough to sew it back. I could almost hear their reasoning. She's busy. She's always traveling for her little online businesses. She never brings a +1. She doesn't really belong in the same category anymore. She won't mind. She's independent. But I did mind. And it wasn't about the lake house or the potato salad or hearing Uncle Ron retell the same deer hunting story he always did. It was about being erased. Quietly, cleanly, with a group text and a blinking cursor that never typed my name. My mother, Susan, had once told me I was her anchor. After Dad left, it was me who stayed up with her through grief and panic attacks. I gave up a semester abroad to keep her from spiraling, but now she couldn't be bothered to forward a family invite. The cruelty was gentle, painless in appearance, but it cut deep, precisely because it wore the mask of forgetfulness. My sister Lena, who once called me crying because her baby had colic and her husband was out drinking, had replaced gratitude with distance the moment she became the mom with 3. She'd leaned into that role like it granted her sainthood, and suddenly I was just the weird sister who ran companies instead of raising kids. Still staring at the screen, I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Just one. Just enough. Then, like a strange reflex, my lips curved. Slowly, steadily. Because while they were busy building narratives, I had been building something far more powerful, and I wasn't going to ask for a seat at their table. I was going to make the table obsolete. They always said the farmhouse was too much of a dream, a crumbling old structure with moss-caked bricks, peeling green shutters, and vines clawing up the side like time itself wanted to swallow it. But I remembered it differently. I remembered the way my grandfather used to point to it from across the lake when I was little, saying, "If we ever made it, that'd be the place." We never did. Not by their definition, anyway. But I had. Quietly. Without asking permission. Without needing applause. I bought it in cash under an LLC, made sure no Monroe name was attached. Not because I was hiding, but because I wanted it mine. Mine in the way they never let anything be mine growing up. Opinions, space, recognition. I poured myself into that house. Every nail, every beam, every paint swatch chosen with the clarity of someone reconstructing more than wood. I wasn't renovating a building. I was rebuilding my place in the world, on my own terms. Every choice I made was intentional, not decorative, defiant. The porch wasn't just for aesthetics. It was wide enough to host dinners. The dock wasn't just for sunset views. It was for arrival, for statement. I installed custom lighting on the old oak tree in the front yard because I knew it would be the first thing they'd see when they pulled in, and I wanted awe to settle before they even stepped out of the car. The interior? Restoration, not reinvention. The original fireplace stayed. I had the tile beneath the carpet uncovered and retiled with warm hickory plank floors. I left the original beams exposed, raw, imperfect. Like me. Like everything they tried to erase in favor of more presentable family members. The Elm Haven wasn't a house. It was a line in the sand, a reclamation of space, history, and voice. What made it sweeter was the timing. Just days before the reunion invite, I'd learned about the foreclosure of the old Monroe family lake house. Uncle Dave, in all his beer-bellied glory, had quietly defaulted on the mortgage trying to keep up a lifestyle his retirement couldn't afford. No one mentioned it. Of course they didn't. To admit it would mean admitting weakness, loss, failure. And that's when the idea took shape. Sharp, clean, unshakable. Let them gather in the ashes of what they thought they'd built. I would offer them something better. Not out of mercy, out of precision. They arrived like royalty summoned to a coronation they hadn't approved. 5 cars pulling into the gravel semicircle with the self-importance only people used to being centered can carry. Their doors opened in staggered succession, like actors unsure of their cues. My sister Lena emerged first, adjusting the ruffled hem of her buttercup yellow sundress, scanning the scene with a half smile that faltered almost immediately. Jared stepped out next, his wife clinging to her purse like it might provide an explanation. Behind them came Uncle Dave in his too-tight golf polo and Aunt Marlene, already whispering behind a manicured hand. They expected clapboard charm at best, maybe a quirky barn decked in DIY centerpieces and folding chairs. But what greeted them was something wholly unanticipated. Imposing, intentional. Every detail of Elm Haven had been curated not to impress, but to redefine me, and by extension, the entire hierarchy they thought they controlled. The hydrangeas out front had bloomed in heavy, full clusters, a soft border of defiance against the bone-white pillars and black double doors. On the front lawn, the linen-draped tables shimmered under the late spring sun. Caterers, yes, caterers, carried trays of herb-crusted salmon, lemon-thyme roast chicken, and trays of miniature tarts like the kind they only ever saw in magazines. Soft jazz floated from hidden speakers like the house itself was humming a secret. The sign was the exclamation point. Welcome to Elm Haven. The new Monroe legacy. That line had taken me 3 days to finalize. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I needed it to land like a truth bomb wrapped in calligraphy. And it did. Their faces, the microseconds of confusion hardening into realization, were everything I had rehearsed in my mind for months. When I stepped out onto the porch, the click of my heels on the wood was the only sound. Navy silk, clean lines. No apologies. "Hi," I said with a polite smile that stopped just short of warm. Their silence wasn't just shock, it was recalibration. They were trying to slot me back into a category that no longer existed. Lena blinked too quickly. My father scratched his jaw like he needed a minute to assemble a coherent emotion. My mother, once the master of poise, looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe through her nose. "This is yours?" Jared finally managed. "Yes," I said. "I bought it last year, fixed it up, quietly." And then, the question I had known would come. "But why didn't you say anything?" I smiled, slow and sharp. "I guess I didn't think I'd be invited." They moved through my home like guests at a wake, unsure whether to offer condolences or compliments. Their voices were low, their smiles brittle. Every glance traced the woodwork, the vaulted ceilings, the curated family portraits, not of them, but of me. Candid shots of hikes, city skylines, handwritten quotes about independence and silence. They realized, slowly, that they were surrounded by a story they hadn't been written into, and that story, my story, was flourishing without them. No one dared ask for a tour. They wandered instead, in slow, self-conscious clusters. My cousin Megan ran her fingers along the marble countertop like it might whisper a secret. Uncle Dave looked up at the skylight in the reading nook and muttered, "She must have paid a fortune for this," as though saying it aloud might make it less real. The same people who'd once mocked me for living online now stood surrounded by the offline proof of everything I'd built, without their input, approval, or awareness. By the time the barbecue was served, they'd grown quieter. The kind of quiet that settles over people when they realize they're no longer the main characters. I watched Lena try to command attention with anecdotes about her kids' swim meets, only to be met with nods too practiced to be sincere. I watched Susan, my mother, cling to a paper plate and stand near the rose arbor, looking like she was waiting for a cue that never came. Eventually, she approached. Her hands trembled just enough to reveal what her smile tried to hide. "I never wanted you to feel left out," she said, as though intention could rewrite action. I didn't blink. "But you did leave me out." There was no bitterness in my voice, only truth, not a weapon, a mirror. "And it's fine," I added. "I don't need an apology. I just needed to remember who I am without needing your approval." Her face flickered, caught between shame and nostalgia. But I didn't offer her a rope. Let her sit in the discomfort she'd once passed to me like second helpings at a family dinner. By dusk, the sky softened into a watercolor of gold and lavender. They began to leave, one by one, retreating to their SUVs with gift bags they didn't deserve, local honey, lavender soap, hand-sealed letters thanking them for being part of the legacy. I'd written those words with a smile, knowing full well their presence wasn't the legacy. I was. Lena stood last on the porch, her sandals tapping nervously. "I had no idea," she said, finally. I looked her in the eye, calm, certain. "That," I said, "was the point."